Here are some morbid facts about Albert Einstein. Around 1902, Einstein had an illegitimate child named Lee Searle with his future wife Mileva. Very little is known about the girl other than that she was mentally disabled and died from infection at a very young age. In all likelihood, Albert never met the girl in person. Her existence was only discovered in 1987 through a collection of letters. Soon afterwards, the relationship was falling apart, so Einstein made Mileva sign a contract to help work things out. It had multiple conditions such as that my clothes and laundry are kept in good order, that I will receive my 3 meals regularly in my room, and that my bedroom and study are kept neat at all times. After those two eventually got divorced, Einstein married the daughter of his mother's sister, making them first cousins. Despite being very smart, Albert's second son Edward was diagnosed with schizophrenia and described by his father as an insoluble problem. He was sent to a mental asylum at the age of 20 and remained there for the next 35 years before dying of a stroke in 1965. Einstein encouraged President Roosevelt to develop an atomic bomb because he feared the Nazis would make one first. But he deeply regretted this after hearing about the devastation of Hiroshima, and knowing that his discoveries led to the invention of the atomic bomb made him very depressed. After suffering from an aortic aneurysm in 1955, Einstein refused surgery, stating that he wanted to end his life gracefully. He was taken to the hospital but refused any further medical intervention. Einstein's last words were unfortunately lost forever since he said them in German, which the nurse treating him did not speak. The man who performed Einstein's autopsy stole his brain and kept it in a jar for 20 years. He found that the part of Einstein's brain that processes math and language was 15% bigger than the average human's. Einstein's eyeballs were also taken by the same man and now remain locked away in a safety deposit box in New York City. Morbid facts. While serving a life sentence for murder, Rocky Beeman brutally murdered a fellow inmate who was serving a life sentence for essaying a 10-year-old girl. But despite this, Beeman was later given a child rapist as his cellmate, who he proceeded to brutally murder as well. He said he resented sex offenders and that killing them gave him, quote, "the best feeling I've had in a long time." He also said the only way to stop him from killing them was to execute him. Grady Stiles Jr. was born in 1937 with a rare genetic condition known as ectrodactyly, which gave him claw-like hands and feet. He became a circus performer under the name Lobster Boy, but was known to be a viciously abusive alcoholic in person. In 1978, he was convicted of murdering his daughter's fiancé on the day before their wedding. He openly confessed to the murder but wasn't sent to prison since no state institution had the resources for an inmate with his condition. Stiles continued to perform until 1992 when he was murdered by a hitman hired by his wife and son. In the case that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were left stranded on the moon, NASA planned on cutting off communication with them. They didn't want to record how the men chose to die, leaving them to either run out of oxygen or take their own lives with no further earthly contact. FDNY Ladder 3 was one of the first units to show up at the World Trade Center on 9/11. Its crew of 11 men sadly perished in the collapse of the North Tower, and now their truck is on display in the 9/11 Museum. In April of 2015, 28-year-old Shayna Sims gained access to a funeral home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She pretended to be a makeup artist to access the body of Tabitha Lynch. Apparently, Shayna resented Lynch and suspected that her husband had been having an affair with her. So as payback, Sims decided to mutilate Lynch's body, cutting up her face and removing multiple organs and chunks of her hair. Court sentenced her to 16 years in prison for unlawfully removing a body part from a corpse. In 2010, the teenage daughter of Michelle Kalina came across something horrifying in her mother's closet: the decomposed remains of 5 babies. Over the course of 14 years, Michelle gave birth to at least 5 children, ending their lives immediately after they were born. She was sentenced to between 20 and 40 years in prison. When Frank Zappa was a child, he always played with the mercury that his chemist father brought home from work, often covering his entire bedroom floor with the element. But childhood exposure to mercury is now known to cause prostate cancer as an adult, which Zappa would end up dying from at the age of 52. In 1978, over 2,000 students from Pennsylvania tried to set the world record for the largest game of tug-of-war. But instead, the 2,000-foot rope snapped, releasing several thousand pounds of stored energy. Nearly 200 students were wounded, 5 had their fingertips severed, and hundreds more received second-degree burns. Here's a 2021 photo of Alec Baldwin breaking down in tears after firing a prop gun that killed the director of photography on the movie set of Rust. The tragic incident happened as a result of catastrophic failures in safety procedures on the set. The woman who was responsible for checking the firearms was only 24 years old and had very little experience in her role. Rust was her second film as lead armorer, since she had previously worked on another Western film called The Old Way, where she received multiple safety complaints from the cast and crew. She also admitted on a podcast that she felt overwhelmed and underprepared for her job on Rust. The live round that killed Helena Hutchins and injured Joel Souza was not supposed to be on the set at all. The production had a very strict rule that banned any live ammunition on the premises, and only blanks or dummy rounds could be used. But it was later revealed that some of the crew members used the same guns for target practice with live rounds during their off hours, and had failed to properly clean and inspect the weapons before returning them to the armory. These are the hands of Japanese serial killer Tsutomu Miyazaki. He was born with a rare birth defect that caused his hand joints to be fused together, preventing him from being able to bend his wrists upwards. Two Mice Eating Cheese is the name of London's smallest statue, which commemorates 2 construction workers who died in 1862. They were scuffling over a missing sandwich that resulted in both of them falling off the scaffolding. Turns out it was just stolen by mice. The movie Jaws directly contributed to a surge in shark hunting and a massive drop in shark populations. Author Peter Benchley deeply regretted writing Jaws, saying, "Knowing what I know now, I could never write that book today. Sharks don't target human beings, and they certainly don't hold grudges." Today, sharks kill only around 10 humans per year, but humans kill around 11,000 sharks every hour. A 34-year-old man with ALS completely lost the ability to move anything, including his eyes. When a brain chip finally allowed him to communicate again, the first thing he said was, "I need a beer." There's typically an IQ minimum of 80 points to serve in the US military. But to meet the manpower requirements of the Vietnam War, the US Army loosened up on this policy and began recruiting soldiers with mental disabilities. These men were known as McNamara's morons and died at 5 times the rate of other Americans in the war. This is also what the character Forrest Gump was based on. A suicide bomber in Afghanistan was thwarted by a stray dog which barked and snarled at the man, causing him to prematurely detonate at the entrance. The dog was then flown to the United States and appeared on Oprah before being adopted. But tragically, she ran away from home and was captured by an animal shelter which ended up euthanizing her by mistake. In 1943, Polish ballerina Francesca Mann arrived at Auschwitz. When ordered to take off her clothes, she did so provocatively to divert the attention of the guards. While the roll call officer was distracted, she grabbed his gun and shot the man in the head. She then managed to wound another guard before other prisoners joined her rebellion until they were all shot dead. During the 1980s, Rebecca Schaeffer was the star of the popular CBS sitcom My Sister Sam. But in 1989, she was fatally shot in the doorway of her West Hollywood apartment by an obsessed fan who had been stalking her for over 3 years. The 21-year-old's death led to the passing of some of the first anti-stalking laws in America. This devastating photo was taken by Tom Stoddard during the Sudanese famine in 1998. It shows a well-nourished Sudanese man stealing a bag of corn from a starving child after it was given to him by a charity. Here's a photo of the unidentified victims of John Wayne Gacy being laid to rest at a mass funeral. In 2006, 18-year-old Ryan Waller was shot in the face during a Phoenix home invasion. His girlfriend was killed, but Ryan somehow survived. However, police mistakenly treated Ryan as a suspect, not a victim. Despite a severe bullet wound in his head, Ryan was interrogated for hours and denied medical treatment. He eventually passed away as a result of the horrific negligence. When Theo Von was born in 1980, his dad Roland was 70 years old. Theo says he was always afraid to develop a relationship with Roland because he knew his dad would die when he was at a young age. His father ended up dying in an accidental shooting accident when Theo was 16 years old. British man Andrew Haig was sentenced to life in prison earlier this year after beating his 50-year-old neighbor to death with a bag of Pokemon cards. The two had gotten into an argument after Haig's neighbor accused him of being a pedophile. In 2012, Texas nurse Kimberly Sains was sentenced to life in prison after killing 5 of her patients by injecting bleach into their dialysis lines. Here are some of the distress calls that were painted onto houses during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Many refused to evacuate their homes because they weren't allowed to bring any pets into sheltering areas. The Category 5 hurricane ended up taking the lives of around 1,400 people and 500,000 pets. In September of 2008, Blink-182 drummer Travis Barker survived a plane crash that killed 4 out of the 6 people on board. He suffered third-degree burns over 65% of his body and underwent 16 surgeries over an 11-week span. Travis was in so much pain that he repeatedly called friends and offered them over $1 million to help him end his own life. A prion disease called kuru can be contracted when a human consumes another human's brain. It was typically found in cannibals from New Guinea who would consume the brains of their dead relatives as part of a funerary ritual. The fatal disease would slowly form holes in the victims' brains and cause them to laugh uncontrollably. In 2016, a Texas father drove home and went to sleep, forgetting that his 6-month-old daughter was still strapped to her car seat. Hours later, he found her unresponsive in the blistering hot car. Before attempting CPR and calling 911, he brought her inside and placed her in the refrigerator to try and revive her. But the child had likely died hours earlier, and the man was charged with manslaughter. In 2018, 16-year-old Kevin Watkins was lagging horribly while attempting to play Xbox in his Georgia family's home. In an effort to improve the speed, he decided to change the Wi-Fi password to prevent others from using it and slowing down the connection while he was gaming. Soon enough, an argument broke out between Kevin and his mom, escalating to a point where his older sister Alexis had to step in to prevent Kevin from physically harming their mother. Tragically, Kevin placed Alexis in a strong chokehold and refused to let go despite his younger brother and mother begging for him to stop. By the time police arrived 15 minutes later, Alexis was no longer moving or responsive, but Kevin still had her in a chokehold. She had been starved of oxygen for a lengthy amount of time, resulting in extreme brain damage. Alexis was quickly rushed to the hospital, but was soon pronounced dead from asphyxiation. Kevin was tried for murder and sentenced to life in prison for the tragic incident. In 1998, Dana Carvey underwent open heart surgery to clear a blocked artery, but the surgeon operated on the wrong blood vessel. After spending 6 months recovering from the life-threatening botch, he won a $7.5 million lawsuit against the hospital and donated all of it to charity. In 2015, an Italian grandma accidentally sent 2 adults and 3 children to the hospital after making them hot cocoa that had expired in 1990. In 2013, a collection of files revealed that the U.S. government lobotomized over 2,000 veterans against their will after World War II. They were lobotomized for reasons such as PTSD, depression, schizophrenia, and homosexuality. Actress Brittany Murphy and her husband both mysteriously passed away from pneumonia and severe anemia in their home only 5 months apart. Murphy's mom believes both of them were victims of toxic mold. Jonah Hill had to be hospitalized while filming The Wolf of Wall Street after snorting too much fake cocaine. In 2021, an 82-year-old man from Austria had the wrong leg amputated during surgery. The man was told he would still need his other leg amputated as well. The hospital said the incident occurred as a result of a sequence of unfortunate circumstances. Here's a devastating photo of a Colorado police officer distracting a little girl after her dad lost his life in a car accident. Judy Melanik is a medical examiner who identified hundreds of bodies after the 9/11 attacks, most of which were just scraps of flesh or pieces of limbs. She was called in August of 2002 because someone had found a foot bone on top of a skyscraper a quarter-mile away from Ground Zero. Jeanette McCurdy has described the relationship she had with her mother Deborah as both emotionally and sexually abusive. When Jeanette was 3 years old, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent multiple surgeries and transplants. As a result, Deborah would perform routine vaginal and breast exams on Jeanette and never allowed her to shower alone until she turned 17. Living in poverty, her mother forced Jeanette into acting when she was 6 years old to financially support the family, and because Deborah had always wanted to become famous herself. McCurdy says that her mother was obsessed with making her a star and introduced Jeanette to a calorie restriction once she turned 11, leading to various eating disorders that Jeanette still struggles with, including anorexia and bulimia. McCurdy says that she refused to appear in the revival series of iCarly only because she didn't want to be reminded of her mother's abuse during the original show. Just last year, Jeanette released a book with the title I'm Glad My Mom Died 9 years after she passed away from breast cancer. South Korean actor Jo Son is known for playing Random Task in the first Austin Powers movie. But in 2008, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for torturing and essaying a female victim on Christmas Day. 3 years later, 27 years were added onto his sentence after he murdered his cellmate. In 2019, Florida man Grant Amato murdered his mother, father, and brother and tried to stage it as a murder-suicide committed by his brother. But police didn't buy his story when they found out his parents were threatening to kick him out of their house over his severe porn addiction. He had stolen over $200,000 from them and spent it all on a cam model from Bulgaria. The photo on the right shows a Houston police officer reacting outside the home where Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in 2001. She started by holding 3 of her boys underwater in her bathtub until they stopped struggling. She then drowned her 6-month-old Mary, whom she left floating in the tub. Her last living child, Noah, soon walked in and asked what was wrong with Mary, then ran when he realized what was going on. But Yates quickly caught up to the 7-year-old and drowned him as well. Afterwards, she laid the lifeless bodies of her children together in her bed. She then called the police, repeatedly saying she needed an officer but refusing to say why. During the trial, the defense argued that Yates was severely mentally ill and not in control of her actions during the murders. She was in a deeply delusional state, believing she needed to murder her children to prevent them from going to hell. In 2006, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a high-security mental hospital in Texas where she remains to this day. In 2011, Chicago man Robert Lyons bludgeoned his mother with a champagne bottle before relentlessly stabbing her and pouring chemicals all over her body. He did this all because she refused to buy him skybox tickets for an upcoming Avril Lavigne concert. Robert was 39 years old at the time. This was the last photo taken of resistance leader Chiang Benua just moments before she was executed by bayonet. She led a Chinese guerrilla movement against the Japanese during the invasion of her country before she was captured in 1938. While in captivity, the 24-year-old was brutally tortured and gang raped by several guards but died with a defiant smile on her face. In 2022, 70-year-old Maya Murma was collecting water in India when an elephant suddenly trampled her. She was quickly rushed to the hospital, but ended up dying from her catastrophic injuries. When family members gathered for her funeral, the same elephant appeared, threw Murmu's body into the air, and trampled it again. In 2018, Kaylee Mudhart ripped out her own eyeballs and smashed them with her hands during a meth-induced psychotic episode. Kaylee had been awake for almost 48 hours straight, snorting and injecting a concoction of tainted methamphetamine which caused horrific hallucinations. In 1975, 197 passengers on a Japan Airlines flight became sick after eating food contaminated with staph bacteria. 144 of them were so ill that they required hospitalization, while 30 of them ended up in critical condition. Turns out one of the cooks who prepared the food had infected lesions on one of his hands. Morbid sports facts. 2006, the Miami Hurricanes football team gathered in prayer for their teammate Brian Pata after he had been murdered by an unknown assailant. 15 years later, his teammate Rashawn Jones ended up being charged with his murder. In 1989, the Buffalo Sabres goalie had his neck sliced by another player's skate, severing his carotid artery. It resulted in so much blood loss that 11 fans fainted, 2 had heart attacks, and 3 players puked on the ice. His life was saved by the team medic, who luckily served in the Vietnam War as a combat medic. In 1962, a Cuban boxer named Benny Paret made fun of his opponent Emil Griffith for being a homosexual. Griffith ended up beating Paret so badly that he fell into a coma and died 10 days after the fight. Morbidly wholesome facts. 2 of Kurt Cobain's best friends, Mark Lanigan and Dylan Carson, say that Courtney Love saved their lives after Kurt's death. They were struggling addicts at the time, and Courtney felt that Kurt would want them to be saved. So she decided to support them both morally and financially so that they could go to rehab and turn their lives around. A man's dying wish was to be buried on his Harley Davidson in a glass casket so that his rider friends could see his final ride. If a pregnant mother suffers organ damage, the baby in the womb sends stem cells to repair the damaged organ. While on death row for killing a police officer in 1987, Tennessee man Philip Workman was told to make his last meal request. But instead of a meal for himself, he wanted a pizza to be donated to a local homeless person. His final request was denied, and Workman refused to eat anything before he was executed that night. But the next day, homeless shelters across Tennessee received thousands of donated pizzas from people all over the state honoring Workman's last request. Keanu Reeves' sister Kim was diagnosed with the deadly blood cancer leukemia in 1991. In response, he sold his home to move closer to her, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and provided all of her necessary medications. Once she recovered, Keanu started a private charity to fund cancer research in children's hospitals. In 2009, he was interviewed saying, "I don't like to attach my name to it, I just let the foundation do what it does." Frank Sinatra died the night of Seinfeld's finale, and his ambulance made it to the hospital in record time since there was no traffic due to everyone watching the show. Hans Scharf, the most successful Nazi interrogator in World War II, never physically harmed an enemy soldier. Instead, he treated them with respect and kindness, taking them for walks, letting them visit their captured comrades in the hospital, and even letting captured pilots go on test flights. His methods were very successful since virtually everyone ended up talking. Photos taken before disaster. This photo taken last month shows 7-year-old Arthur Bittencourt giving a thumbs up while playing in a pile of poisonous limestone powder in Brazil. Just minutes later, Arthur was tragically fighting for his life after accidentally inhaling particles of the toxic substance. He was quickly rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. In 2022, Ukrainian woman Irina Filkina had her photo taken after getting a manicure for Valentine's Day. A few weeks later, she was killed by a tank while pushing her bicycle in the town of Bucha, and her body was identified by her manicure. This photo taken in 2004 shows Deborah Garlick enjoying the island paradise of Phi Phi in Thailand. But soon afterwards, a massive tsunami struck the area, killing around 230,000 people in total. This was the last photo taken on Deborah's camera before she was tragically swept away by the wave. This peaceful photo of the New York City skyline was taken from the Manhattan Bridge around 8:30 a.m. on September 11, 2001. Just 16 minutes later, a plane would crash into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Here's a pic of volcanologist David A. Johnston 13 hours before he was killed by the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. He was the first to report the eruption from an observation post 6 miles away, transmitting the message, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," just before he was swept away by a lateral blast traveling at near supersonic speed. He had spent the last several months of his life studying the volcano, and his alert likely saved thousands of lives. These are some of the craziest torture devices in history that were actually used. These punishing shoes were a type of medieval torture device. The victim would have to stand on their tippy toes for as long as they could, before falling back and having rusty spikes jammed into their heel. Rat torture was another medieval method that involved putting a bunch of rats into a cage that was strapped to the victim's stomach. The top of the cage was then slowly heated, forcing the rats to burrow through the victim's body to escape the heat. During the Middle Ages, there was a form of torture where the victim's feet were covered in salt and a goat would start licking them. Known as tickle torture, it would become extremely painful once the skin was worn away by the rough tongue of the goat, creating a wound with salt slowly trickling in. Insane coincidences. In 2003, a woman found a painting in the trash on a New York City curb. She felt it had power, so she took it home without knowing anything about its value or origin. After holding on to it for 4 years, she eventually discovered that it was a very valuable Mexican painting that was stolen in 1987. So she contacted authorities and received a $15,000 reward plus a percentage of its sale price of over $1 million. In August of 2010, a 13-year-old British teenager was struck by lightning at 1313 on Friday the 13th. He was the only one struck amongst a crowd of 150,000 people who were watching an air show. In 2014, a 39-year-old Brazilian woman named Adriana wanted to find her mother who abandoned her as a baby. So she went on a TV show and ended up finding her mom through the power of the internet. The two had an emotional reunion, but her mother revealed that she had also abandoned Adriana's infant brother, Leandro. In a bizarre twist, Adriana's husband turned out to be her brother, Leandro. But despite the pair being siblings, they vowed to never separate. Proof that animals are evolving. Firstly, here's a video of Rambo the orangutan casually driving a golf cart around a private zoo in Dubai. Rambo has apparently been driving since she was very young and has since graduated from small toy cars to golf carts. She even looks through the rearview mirror and slows down at turns, demonstrating better driving abilities than most humans. This video shows the 200 IQ intelligence of a wild hare. Knowing that the hunting dog is following its scent, the hare runs forward along the path before doubling back and running off in the opposite direction once the dog passes. Here's a video of a chimpanzee displaying impressive skills while taking a visual memory test. Chimps can actually perform this task far better than humans since they've developed excellent visual memory in order to spot dangers in the wild incredibly quickly. Artifact porn. This creepy looking costume is actually a 16th century scuba suit designed by Leonardo da Vinci. It was equipped with 2 breathing tubes attached to a cork diving bell floating on the surface. While working in the water city of Venice, Da Vinci designed the suit for sneak attacks on enemy ships from underwater. This golden throne chair was found in the tomb of King Tut. Its colors haven't faded over 3,000 years, highlighting the impressive skills of ancient Egyptian craftsmen. Here's the anchor of a 13th century Mongol invasion ship that was just recently lifted out of the sea near Nagasaki, Japan. At just under 2,000 years old, the oldest bottle of olive oil was discovered under the volcanic ash of Herculaneum. The discovery was extremely important to science since it shed some light on the molecular evolution of olive oil over time. The earliest known manufactured mirrors were found in Turkey and are approximately 8,000 years old. They were made of obsidian and had impressively good optical quality according to researchers. Built around 1300 BC, the Archidiko Bridge in Greece is the oldest arch bridge that's still in use today. It was used as a chariot bridge some 3,300 years ago. The world's oldest purse was found in a grave in Germany and was made sometime around 2500 BC. The fabric it was made of has disintegrated over the years, but it was studded with over 100 ancient dog teeth which remain intact. The Vimos coat is a 22-pound piece of iron chain armor made by hand from roughly 20,000 tiny rings. Known as the oldest completely preserved chainmail in the world, it was likely thrown into a Danish peat bog as a victory offering after battle some 1,800 years ago. The world's oldest spear tip was discovered in England in 1911. It was likely made by Neanderthals around 400,000 years ago. Built around the 13th century, La Maison des Jeans is the oldest known house in France. Back then, houses were taxed based on the size of the ground floor, so they were often built with a smaller foundation than the rest of the house. The world's oldest light bulb that still works has been burning since 1901 and can be found at a California firehouse. Its longevity has baffled scientists for decades since it's been left on for 24 hours a day for almost 122 years straight. Most morbid facts. Queen Elizabeth had 2 first cousins named Nerissa and Catherine who were severely disabled. Nerissa was publicly pronounced dead in 1940 while her sister Catherine was said to have died in 1961. But it was later revealed that they were both tucked away in a mental asylum until their actual deaths in 1986 and 2014. Paul McCartney decided not to tell his wife Linda that her cancer progressed and had become terminal. He didn't think it would do her any good if she knew, so she continued riding her horse until the day before she died.
Male genital transplant surgeons typically exclude the testicles when performing a transplant. This is because the deceased donor would become the biological father of any future babies produced by that nutsack.
In 1981, David Kerwin was driving through Yellowstone's hot springs with his friend Ronald Ratcliffe and Ronald's dog Moosey. At some point they parked their car for a better look, but Moosey suddenly jumped into one of the hot springs and started yelping. Even though many people warned him not to jump into the near boiling water, David dove straight in and attempted to rescue the suffering dog. He grabbed Moosey and made it close to the edge before letting go and sinking until his friend pulled him back out. Immediately afterwards, David muttered, "That was stupid. How bad am I? That was a stupid thing I did." He was immediately blinded since the hot spring had melted his eyeballs, and when someone helped to pull his shoe off, his skin came off with it. He sustained third-degree burns over 100% of his body and died the next day after living his final hours in agonizing pain. Sadly, Moosey the dog also did not survive. Octomom Nadia Sulman became notorious in 2009 when she had 8 babies as a result of in vitro fertilization. However, Nadia claimed that while she was heavily sedated, it was her fertility specialist that convinced her to have 12 embryos implanted in her at once. All of the babies miraculously survived, but the doctor had his license revoked for extreme malpractice. This violin was used by the lead member of the band that played on the Titanic. Just like in the movie, they continued playing as the ship went down. Former beauty queen Joyce McKinney made headlines in 1977 when she kidnapped 17-year-old Mormon boy Kirk Anderson from his church. According to Anderson, she chained him to her bed frame and forced him to be her sex slave for 3 straight days. But according to British law at the time, no crime of rape had been committed since the victim was male. When Eminem was a heavy user, he would swallow handfuls of pills without even knowing what they were. In 2007, he once overdosed on so much methadone that doctors informed him he was only 2 hours away from dying. It was such a wake-up call that he quit drugs almost immediately and has remained sober ever since. A horrific bungee cord injury caused this man's iris to completely collapse. Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma used to be the wealthiest black community in all of America. That was until 1921 when a mob of white supremacists attacked the community with the help of the National Guard. Using guns, explosives, and even airplanes, they decimated 35 square blocks of the neighborhood and murdered hundreds of African Americans. It's known today as the Black Wall Street Massacre. This 1994 photo shows O.J. Simpson holding hands with his children at the funeral of their mother and his ex-wife, Nicole Simpson Brown. She was brutally stabbed to death, most likely by O.J. himself, even though he was famously acquitted in court a few months later. During the funeral, O.J. reportedly spent a significant amount of time with Nicole's body and was even seen kissing her on the lips. Up until 1974, it was illegal to appear in public in the city of Chicago if you were ugly, and each offense was subject to a fine. The law was primarily made to prevent people with disabilities from going outside. While on his deathbed and completely unable to speak due to throat cancer, famous author Aldous Huxley wrote his final request to his wife to be given 100 micrograms of LSD. So she injected him with 2 separate doses of acid, and he died just a few hours later while tripping balls. Nicknamed the Merchant of Death, Russian arms dealer Victor Bout rose to power after the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s. Using his fleet of 60 cargo planes, the arms he's brokered have helped fuel conflicts in countries including Afghanistan, Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Rwanda, Liberia, Sudan, and Sierra Leone. Willing to sell weapons to anyone who wanted them, Bout has supplied both sides of multiple civil wars and is said to be responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. He was arrested during a sting operation in 2008 where he was caught selling surface-to-air missiles that would have been used to kill American troops. But Victor Bout is now free thanks to a prisoner swap for WNBA player Brittany Griner, who was arrested 6 months ago after trying to bring a THC cartridge on a Russian airplane. In their earlier years, Bob Marley and the Wailers would often rehearse late at night in the local cemetery. This was because their manager convinced them that if they could conquer their fear of spirits, they could conquer their stage fright in front of crowds. Morbidly wholesome facts. The dog on the left is an award-winning French bulldog named Arnie. The dog on the right is also a French bulldog, but he was bred in the Netherlands by Hawbuck's Kennel. They're a breeder trying to establish a new, healthier template for French bulldogs, which are typically prone to overheating and breathing problems directly related to their flat facial structure. Here's an 1889 photo of a blind Muslim man named Muhammad carrying his best friend, a paralyzed Christian man with dwarfism named Samir. Despite their opposing religious views, each man depended on the other to survive. In 1967, line worker Randall Champion accidentally grabbed a high-voltage line, instantly electrocuting himself and stopping his heart. That's when fellow lineman J.D. Thompson immediately rushed over and performed CPR until paramedics arrived. Champion ended up surviving, and this famous photo became known as the Kiss of Life. This beach in Turkey is one of the only beaches in the world that's accessible to handicapped people. When she was 7 years old, Christina Sandhaus was diagnosed with a life-threatening condition that forced doctors to remove half of her brain. But she miraculously grew up to earn a master's degree and now works as a professional speech pathologist. During a Bronx apartment fire in 2010, 18-year-old Vanessa Scott realized that her baby cousin started choking on smoke. That's when she managed to slide the girl through the 5th-story window and held onto her tightly so that she wouldn't suffocate. Both the woman and her cousin ended up surviving. Just days after 95-year-old Jimmy Carter received 15 stitches from falling, the former president traveled to Nashville to help build porches for Habitat for Humanity. For years, Texas father Gordon Hartman struggled to find an amusement park that would accommodate his daughter Morgan's special needs. So in 2005, he decided to sell his successful home building company and built an entire theme park fully accessible to people with special needs. The $50 million park features dozens of attractions, and admissions for people with disabilities are completely free. In Iraq 2009, Sergeant Dakota Meyer disobeyed a direct order to pull back from his position. Instead, he entered an area that was under fire so that he could rescue 4 wounded soldiers. He ended up going back 5 times and saved the lives of 36 men, saying, "That's what you do for a brother." Weird crime facts. In 2007, Nicolas Cage bought a Tyrannosaurus skull for $276,000 after winning a bidding war with Leonardo DiCaprio. But upon later finding out that the skull had been stolen from Mongolia, Cage immediately turned it over to authorities. While in prison, Unabomber Ted Kaczynski received an invite to the 50-year reunion of his graduating class at Harvard. He RSVP'd listing his occupation as prisoner and his 8 life sentences as awards. In 1979, the FBI formed a fake company which attempted to bribe members of Congress. About 25% of them accepted the bribe and were convicted. In 2007, a thief drove a $300,000 Porsche through the glass window of a luxury car showroom. After running out of gas almost immediately, he abandoned the car nearby. But the thief held on to the keys, brought a can of gas to the police station, and stole the car again. Rarest things in the world. In May of this year, a Mercedes-Benz became the most valuable car of all time, selling for a staggering $142 million at auction. It's a 1955 300 SLR Uhlenhaut coupe that's in immaculate condition, and only 2 of them were ever made. Here's an amazing photograph of Earth, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn in a perfect straight line across the sky. This unique 5-planet lineup only happens once every 20 years, the most recent one being this past June. In 2002, the Netherlands built a unique bridge called the Veluwemeer Aqueduct that allows boats to pass over the highway. This person got up close and personal with an extremely rare albino humpback whale off the coast of Australia. The famous whale is named Migaloo, and being this close to him can fetch you a $16,000 fine. This Norwegian building that looks like it has legs was used in the 18th century to store grains. It was propped up with wooden platforms to protect the grain from water damage and pests. Uncombable hair syndrome is an extremely rare condition that literally makes the hair impossible to comb. It currently affects less than 100 people across the globe. In 1960, David Latimer planted a garden inside of a giant glass bottle and opened it just once to water it in 1972. Amazingly, this self-contained ecosystem continues to flourish more than 50 years later. This rare Australian Wagyu tomahawk is making my tummy growl as we speak. In 1986, Romanian sewer workers accidentally stumbled upon a cave that had been sealed off for over 5 million years. The alien-like ecosystem is based completely on chemosynthesis and is home to more than 30 species that can't be found anywhere else on Earth. This is the only known footage of the extremely rare box jellyfish known as Chirodectus. Captured off the coast of Papua New Guinea, this was only the 2nd ever sighting of the species in recorded history. This rare beef tenderloin was slow roasted to perfection. In 1930, the Indiana Bell Building was completely rotated 90 degrees in just 1 month. The 22 million pound structure was moved 15 inches per hour while 600 employees still worked there. There was no interruption to gas, water, electricity, or telephone service, and no one inside felt the building move. Here's an amazing photo of a diver at Silfra Fissure in Iceland touching North America and Europe at the same time. Proof that animals are evolving. An African gray parrot named Nikizi has an advanced vocabulary of about 950 words and can use them in complete sentences with proper grammar. He understands the concept of photographs, can identify objects within a photo, and even demonstrates a sense of humor. In 2004, he saw a picture of Jane Goodall with a chimpanzee before ever meeting her. And when they finally met, he asked her, "Got a chimp?" A honey badger in a South African wildlife center escaped from his enclosure multiple times to fight the lions next door. He's built towers out of sticks, rocks, and mud, and when introduced with a mate, he would stand on her head to escape yet again. Wild wolves and ravens will sometimes form a symbiotic relationship to consume prey. Ravens have been observed calling wolves over to dead animals so that the wolves can rip the carcasses open, in turn leaving some scraps for the ravens once they're finished. In 2005, a wild gorilla in the remote Congolese forest was seen using a stick to test the water depth of a swamp. She was then observed using it as a walking stick to help her cross the body of water, making her the first documented case of a wild gorilla seen using tools. This absolute gentleman of a grizzly bear was videotaped fixing a traffic cone before continuing on his way. What a good guy. Archerfish have been known to prey on land-based insects and small animals by shooting them with a jet of water. Here's some incredibly disturbing footage of a raven speaking human.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Good boy.
I hate it. Domestic dogs are one of the only species of animal that can understand the human gesture of pointing. Other animals such as wolves and primates don't realize that pointing means to look in that direction and will only be interested in your outstretched finger. Insane coincidences! In 1969, an astrologer warned John Lennon that he would be shot on an island. John was so disturbed by this that it caused him to cancel an upcoming yacht trip around the Greek islands. 11 years later, John Lennon was shot and killed on the island of Manhattan. These natural ice formations in Antarctica look like structures built by the ancient Romans. This 3,000-year-old clay pig was found 2 years ago at the Lian ruins of China. Internet users immediately pointed out that it looked oddly similar to the pigs from Angry Birds. An LA couple was ecstatic to see the first ultrasound of their baby until they realized that he looked exactly like Donald Trump. This is one of the 3 ancient Roman pools of Gafsa located in Tunisia, 2 of which are open to the public. Built in the 2nd century BC, the pool is about 15 feet deep and is naturally heated by hot water springs. When you put together the buttons of a World War II Royal Air Force uniform, they turn into a mini compass. The amazing feature was made to be used by troops that were shot down behind enemy lines. During an excavation project at Stirling Castle in Scotland, a grey leather ball was found behind some paneling in a bedroom that belonged to Queen Mary Stuart. Estimated to be over 450 years old, it's said to be the oldest soccer ball in the world. The shaman of Bad Durenberg was a middle-aged woman who was buried around 9,000 years ago in what is now central Germany. Believed to have been a person of great prestige, she was buried with an extraordinary headdress that was made from the bones and teeth of various animals such as deer, cranes, turtles, and wild boar. This incredible video shows archaeologists opening an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus in front of a crowd of people. The coffin contained the body of an ancient priest and had been sealed for over 2,500 years up until this point. In 2020, a massive canvas filled with thousands of Ice Age drawings was found in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. The incredible artwork includes handprints, geometric designs, and a wide array of extinct animals. It spans for nearly 8 miles, and some of the drawings are estimated to be up to 12,600 years old. If you were dying from the plague during the 16th century, this is what the doctor who treated you would have worn. During this time period, it was believed that smelling odors such as rotting corpses was what made people sick. So the beak was filled with a mixture of herbs meant to purify the air the doctor was breathing. This breathtaking staircase at the Chambord Castle in France was designed by Leonardo DiCaprio in the year 1516. This massive two-handed sword was created for Prince Elector Maximilian II in 1689. The blade of this incredible weapon was made completely out of the snout of a sawfish. Contractors in Marino, Italy were excavating for a new McDonald's when they came across a 2,000-year-old road from ancient Rome. Once excavations were complete, they built a glass floor in the restaurant to showcase the amazing discovery. The oldest known deck of 52 playing cards is from the Netherlands circa 1475. They're currently housed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. This 900-year-old Indian sculpture of an elephant and a bull sharing the same head is said to be the oldest optical illusion ever found. The world's oldest cosmetic face cream was found inside of an ancient Roman temple complex dedicated to Mars. It's so incredibly well preserved that it still has finger marks inside of the lid. The oldest known piece of chewing gum was discovered in southern Denmark in 2019. Scientists were able to map out the entire genome of the girl who chewed it around 5,700 years ago. and above is an artist's reconstruction of what she might have looked like. Tucked away in Westminster Abbey, this is the oldest door in all of Great Britain. Made out of a single oak tree, the door has remained standing for just under 1,000 years. The oldest prosthetic eye in the world was discovered in 2006 Iran. It was worn 4,800 years ago by an ancient Persian priestess who stood at 6 feet tall. It's believed to be made out of natural tar and animal fat, and was originally painted gold to make the woman appear to have supernatural powers. The son of President Teddy Roosevelt was the oldest man in the D-Day invasion at the age of 56. Despite arthritis and a heart condition, he stormed the beach with a cane and survived. 1 month later, he died of a heart attack and was posthumously awarded a Medal of Honor. The fighting on Normandy Beach was so intense that 4% of its sand is still made up of broken down shrapnel from D-Day. In Saving Private Ryan, the Omaha Beach scene was so realistic that many veterans left theaters during the opening scene, claiming that it was the most realistic depiction of combat they had ever watched. If your skin ever starts turning yellow like the photo on the left, you should see a doctor as soon as possible. This man had a condition called jaundice, which can indicate serious problems with the liver. These photos were taken before and after the man received a liver transplant. Before the murder of Shinzo Abe, the most recent political assassination in Japan happened in 1960. Leader of the Socialist Party, Inajiro Asanuma, was attacked by a 17-year-old wielding a sword. The brutal murder was captured live on television and broadcasted to millions across Japan. A group of researchers in Africa once hid a speaker near a herd of elephants and played a recording of one of their herd members who had died. The dead elephant's family suddenly went wild calling for him, and his daughter cried out for days afterward. The researchers later vowed to never conduct such an inhumane experiment again. There have been at least 9 different studies on the DARE program, and all of them agree that it either does nothing or only worsens the problem. Gary Webb was an investigative journalist who was one of the first to report on the CIA's involvement in the cocaine trade. A few years later, in 2004, Gary was found dead in his home with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. In 2013, 16-year-old Ethan Couch killed 4 people while drunk driving. But he initially wasn't sentenced to any jail time since his attorney argued that he suffered from affluenza, a mental illness caused by growing up with too much money. In ancient Sparta, only 2 groups of people could have their names inscribed on their tombstones: men who died in battle and women who died in childbirth. In 1994, Los Angeles police arrested a man dressed as the Grim Reaper carrying a scythe. He was reported by various nursing homes after staring through patients' windows while wearing the costume. In 2001, Ashton Kutcher had a girlfriend who was murdered by a serial killer after being stabbed 35 times in her own home. Kutcher would end up testifying in the trial of the Hollywood Ripper, who would later confess to murdering at least 10 women over a 15-year span. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her own death. Alan Lee Davis was convicted of 3 counts of murder after killing a pregnant woman and her 2 daughters in 1982. When he was executed in 1999, it took 3 runs of the electric chair to kill him. Due to the botched execution, he remains the last person to be executed by electric chair in the state of Florida. This 1985 photo was taken on board Japanese Airlines Flight 123 just minutes before the plane crashed into a mountainside. There were 520 fatalities, including everyone shown in this photo. While filming for Rocky IV, Sylvester Stallone challenged Dolph Lundgren to try to knock him out for real. Lundgren hit him so hard that he was sent to the ICU for 9 days and was lucky to survive. The Cordoba fighting dog was a dog breed that became so aggressive that it was very difficult to breed them, since a pair would often fight to the death rather than mate. This eventually contributed to their extinction before the 20th century. This photo from 1960 shows segregationists harassing 6-year-old Ruby Bridges, the first black child to attend an all-white school. They portrayed her as a doll laying in a coffin to protest her attendance at the school. In 2011, scientists conducted an experiment to find out what's inside the average human belly button. One individual who hadn't bathed in years hosted 2 species of bacteria that are typically only found in ice caps and thermal vents. In the year 2000, an orca whale killed a great white shark off the coast of California. According to satellite tags, the smell of the dead shark's carcass apparently caused all nearby great whites to suddenly vanish. One shark that was in the region immediately dove down 500 meters and swam straight to Hawaii without stopping. 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the sunken battleship USS West Virginia was finally salvaged from the ocean floor. On that ship, a calendar was found inside of an airtight room where 3 sailors had marked off 16 days until they died. In 2013, a French man on a business trip died of a heart attack while having sex with a stranger. A French court later ruled that it was a workplace accident and that his wife and family were entitled to compensation. Many say he did it for his family. In 1997, episode 38 of the Pokemon anime aired just one time before being pulled from TV forever. The episode featured a flashing strobe effect that sent nearly 700 children to the hospital due to dizziness, nausea, and seizures. The incident nearly single-handedly ruined the franchise, and the Pokemon Porygon was banned from ever appearing in an episode again. P.T. Barnum began his career as a showman after purchasing a blind slave woman named Joyce Heth. Barnum claimed she was over 160 years old and had been the nanny of George Washington. He exhibited her until her death in 1836 and even charged people 50 cents to watch her autopsy. This devastating photo was taken in India during the Madras famine of 1877. The man is fighting the urge to sleep so that he could protect his family against cannibals. People were so desperate for food that your own neighbor could snatch up your child to eat them at any given time. In 2010, Dave Grohl was admitted to the hospital due to an overdose. He apparently consumed too much caffeine from coffee and thought he was about to die after experiencing severe chest pains. The band Fleetwood Mac highly considered thanking their drug dealer in the credits of their most popular album, Rumors. They only decided against it after their dealer was murdered. The US military buys a prank fart spray called Liquid Ass to train and prepare medics for the stench of the battlefield. This is a 1969 photo of Roman Polanski kneeling next to the door where the word pig is written in his wife Sharon Tate's blood. While Polanski was working on a film in Europe, Tate was stabbed 16 times by members of the Manson family when she was 8.5 months pregnant. Polanski has said that the murders changed him forever and that not being there is his greatest life regret. Hidden Beach is a feature of Mexico's Marietta Islands that looks like something straight out of a storybook. The beach was accidentally discovered in the early 1900s when the Mexican military conducted artillery tests in the area. North Korea's Pyramid of Pyongyang is a 105-story triangle skyscraper that was supposed to open in 1989. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, North Korea was never able to complete the project due to financial crisis. More than 30 years later, the building still remains completely abandoned today. Here are some morbid facts about Richard Ramirez. Like many other serial killers, Richard's childhood was far from pleasant. His father often physically abused him and would sometimes make him spend the night tied to a cross in a graveyard as a form of punishment. And when Richard was just 13, his cousin fatally shot his wife right in front of him. Ramirez was obsessed with satanic themes and symbols and would draw pentagrams on his victims' bodies. He would even force some of his victims to pray to Satan in their final moments instead of to God. In one of his interviews, Ramirez said, "When I die, I want to be buried with sunglasses on and my hands behind my head, so that when I deteriorate, I'll be the chillest skeleton in the graveyard." In 1996, a fan of Ramirez married him in prison after it was already proven he'd murdered 13 adults. But she broke up with him 12 years later when DNA evidence showed that he also killed a 9-year-old girl. Morbidly wholesome facts. When Eminem relapsed in 2008, he called Elton John for advice on how to handle the superstar lifestyle. Elton ended up calling him every day for the next 18 months and became a significant part of his recovery. When disabled man Alan Parton was hit by a car, his service dog Endel immediately dragged him into the recovery position. The dog then pushed his cell phone into his hand, put a blanket over him, and ran to a nearby hospital and barked until someone helped. The man ended up surviving with only minor injuries. Harriet Tubman suffered a traumatic brain injury as a child, which often caused her to slip into sleep-like states. During these sleeps, she would have vivid dreams, which she interpreted as messages from God. They would inspire her to devote her life to freeing Southern slaves through the Underground Railroad. Badasses of history. If it wasn't for this man, it's possible that none of us would be alive today. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis between the US and the Soviet Union, the captain of a Soviet submarine thought they were being shot at by US naval ships and wanted to fire a nuclear torpedo in response. But in order for this to happen, 3 officers on board the submarine had to agree unanimously to fire the nuke. The first 2 men had given their clearance, but Chief of Staff Vasily Arkhipov refused to authorize the launch. The men began arguing, but Arkhipov was a highly respected war hero known for his courage from a previous event. He ultimately convinced the captain to resurface and await new orders from Moscow. Thanks to him, a nuclear war was prevented from breaking out and humans were not made extinct. The oldest known operating bar in the world is Sean's Bar in Ireland. Archaeological records have found that the bar has been serving people since 900 AD, well over 1,000 years ago. Former President of Liberia Charles King holds the world record for the most fraudulent election in history. He won the 1927 election with 234,000 votes in a country with 15,000 voters. In 1964, 17-year-old Randy Gardner set the world record for the longest time without sleep after staying awake for 11 straight days. The Guinness Book of World Records refuses to validate any attempt to break this since it's so dangerous to human health. In 1997, tree hugger Julia Hill started living in a 1,500-year-old California redwood tree to prevent loggers from cutting it down. She ended up staying there for a total of 738 days, and the tree still remains standing today. The longest-running car is a 1966 Volvo with more than 3 million miles on it. That's enough mileage to make 7 round trips to the moon. The world record time for eating 3 72-ounce steaks is held by a 120-pound woman who scarfed them down in 20 minutes. The world's longest manned flight was set in 1959 when Bob Tim and John Cook stayed airborne for 64 straight days. The Cessna plane was refueled over 128 times by a truck chasing it from below. The longest-lasting battery powers a bell at Oxford University that's been continuously ringing since 1840. Nobody knows what the battery is made of and doesn't want to risk destroying it to find out. In the 1990s, a Tennessee man built the world's largest treehouse after claiming that God told him to. The structure had 5 stories, 80 rooms, and took the man 12 years to complete. But in 2019, the entire treehouse burned down in less than 15 minutes under unknown circumstances. In 2013, a Virginia college kid nearly died after drinking an entire quart of soy sauce on a dare. He now holds the world record for the highest blood sodium level ever recorded without brain damage. The 6 sheep sick is listed by the Guinness Book of World Records as the hardest tongue twister in the world. In 2012, French beekeepers couldn't solve the mystery of the blue and green colored honey in their beehives. After months of investigating, it was discovered that the bees were visiting a local factory that produces M&Ms. The Bajau people of Southeast Asia are often considered sea nomads. They have no homes, money, or nationalities, and they spend 60% of their life underwater. They can go spearfishing at depths greater than 200 feet without any scuba gear and have even developed much larger spleens than the average human to help them survive underwater. In the 1930s, a flute player had a pet lyrebird that mimicked his music. Eventually, he released the bird into the wild, but fragments of his music were passed down by generations of lyrebirds. Some of his music is even still present in their songs today. In 2013, a Finnish photographer captured the extraordinary friendship between a female gray wolf and a male brown bear. They shared their food and spent several nights together over a 10-day span before parting ways. Anonychia is the absence of one or more nails on the fingers or toes. In extremely rare cases like this one, the patient might be missing every single one of their nails. This bull was born without the protein myostatin, allowing for unrestricted muscle growth. 50 light years from Earth, there's a dwarf star named Lucy that's made almost completely out of diamonds. It's about the same mass as the Sun and weighs an estimated 10 billion trillion carats. Photographer Jocelyn Anderson captured this once-in-a-lifetime shot of a blackbird catching a ride on an osprey's stick. On November 26, 2012, something happened for the first and only time in the history of New York City. There was not one single report of a violent crime. Only discovered in 1985, Rainbow Lattice Sunstone is an extremely rare igneous rock. Known for its unique lattice pattern, it can only be found in the remote part of an Australian desert. In 2015, Amur the tiger was given a goat to eat, but miraculously became best friends with him instead. The extremely rare Texas star fungus can only be found in 2 locations throughout the world, Texas and Japan. Now this is a thick, juicy ribeye. In 1978, Soviet geologists found a family of 6 surviving in the middle of the Siberian wilderness. They'd been living in isolation for more than 40 years and were completely unaware of World War II. Insane coincidences! In the only novel that Edgar Allan Poe ever wrote, 4 crewmen get lost at sea and end up eating the cabin boy named Richard Parker. In real life, 46 years later, an English yacht sank and the remaining 4 crewmen resorted to eating the cabin boy to survive. That boy's name was Richard Parker. A Bosnian couple began cheating on each other when they both started talking to another person online. When both groups decided to meet in person, the couple realized they'd been cheating on each other with each other. A family photo under the northern lights became a 1 in a million shot when they also captured a shooting star in the background. Secret spaces. Huacachina is a small village built around a desert oasis in southwestern Peru. The lake formed naturally from underground aquifers, and many believe its water has therapeutic properties. It only has a population of about 100 people, but thousands of tourists visit each year. In the early 1900s, the city of Cincinnati built a 2-mile-long subway system that was never used and lies completely abandoned to this day. The Lonely Castle in Saudi Arabia is a massive tomb that was cut out of a boulder about 2,000 years ago. The structure was never fully completed, but it stands as an architectural marvel of ancient times. Cosquer Cave in France is a prehistoric cave that can only be reached through an entrance underwater. Only discovered in 1990, the cave has over 200 drawn figures which date back as far as 27,000 years ago.